So, Robert, because we've got AI note taker, what I'm wondering is, could we ask Daylan, and also I haven't met Roger before, everybody else might know you, Roger, but could we ask for a brief introduction so that it gets into the actual record, the video and the notes that the AI is taking?
Okay, my name is Roger Arnold. I'm a retired systems architect engineer, former aerospace engineer. Since retiring, I've focused mostly on writing about clean energy and energy issues. And I have a background in physics, math, chemistry. I've written mostly unpaid articles that are posted at Energy Central, some paid articles for natural gas transitions. I'm sort of an all of the above person when it comes to actions for climate change mitigation. I'm a strong advocate for carbon sequestration, as well as various options for carbon CDR, ocean alkalinity enhancement, and geoengineering approaches. So I sort of try to touch all bases.
That's great, Roger. Let's come back to a discussion about how we can publicize the ideas that we're sharing here with you, perhaps further later in the meeting. Daylan, I've only just started the recording of the meeting, and would appreciate if you could just repeat your introduction so it's included in the recording.
All right, I'm Daylan Borgelli. I work for the Royal Tropical Institute and on the Sustainable Development Agreements between the Netherlands, Benin, and Bhutan and Costa Rica. I'm a co-founder of the Blue Cooling Initiative, together with Jeanette Hoek and Wouter van Dieren of the Club of Rome. You mentioned before that Hans van Loo works with us, and he has been presenting a very forceful case to governments and to institutions in the last several months and last year as well for planetary cooling, especially marine cloud brightening. I forgot to mention before that I'm also talking to Peter Fikowski, who I saw mentioned in these threads, and that he has also joined us in trying to move for a body to be started in The Hague that might regulate trials of this types of technology.
Thank you very much, Daylan. Now, Hans and Wouter suggested arranging a conference at the Peace Palace in The Hague later this year, which would cover some of the themes that we're particularly interested in. It's sounds a very valuable suggestion.
Yes, the ambition level is to get about 100 institutions interested in, or NGOs interested in joining this, so that we get some movement on it.
Thanks so much. I'd like to.
Yeah, I want to bring in this matter. The first item on the agenda is the matter of the security threat, and I think the peace institution, whatever it's called, in The Hague would be an ideal place to have a gathering of the security community who are concerned with world peace. The climate crisis is the greatest threat to peace since the invention of the atomic bomb, and this isn't generally realized, and the reason for it is because we have these I have the analogy of time bombs in the Arctic, and they can trigger bombs elsewhere on the planet. So we have a time bomb associated with atmospheric circulation that's being disrupted by the rapid heating in the Arctic, which has reduced the temperature gradient. I'm talking really to Dale Ann because she's new to this group, and to Roger Arnold perhaps. The tipping points in the Arctic are the ones that are changing our weather and producing extreme weather events. It's not global warming directly. So when you reduce the temperature gradient between the Arctic and the tropics, this reduces the amount of energy going into the jet stream waves, and the waves tend to meander further to the north and south and get they tend to get into blocking patterns. They stationary or slowly moving, and it's those blocking patterns that cause the weather extremes, because the weather, if it's hot weather, it stays in one place, and we've just had a month of that in the UK, producing record temperatures 0.9 degrees above the previous record, equal of 1940 and 1967, I think are the dates. That doesn't matter, but we also have record ocean surface temperature in the North Atlantic, around the British Isles, in fact, and also in the North Pacific, and also in Siberia. So all the surface water flowing into the Arctic is extra hot, and that's going to warm the Arctic and melt the ice, and so we get even more loss of albedo, and the whole thing is in a vicious, very nasty, vicious cycle. In fact, you know, the difficulty of refreezing the Arctic has possibly doubled over the last couple of years as a result of these new feedback effects. And today, or perhaps yesterday, I read a paper about what's happening to the Greenland ice sheet. It's blocking the jet stream waves in such a way that there's a very long-lasting anticyclone over Greenland that reduces the amount of snow, and so the net mass loss in the summer, when the existing snow and ice melts, is greater. And I had hoped that we could increase that, get the mass loss positive rather than negative by causing more snowfall, but that's going to be very difficult if there's an anticyclone over Greenland. So the difficulties we have are mounting very rapidly. We really need emergency action, and the people who will tell governments, read them the Riot Act, are the security community. They're the only ones who can tell governments that, you know, you've got to do this because it's the security, everybody's security is at stake.
Say a few words in response to that. Sorry to interrupt. I thought you were done.
Yeah. So that was going to be the first point on the agenda. So I've kind of made.
I've put the 4 agenda points that you have suggested into the chat. So they are the security threat from extreme weather and tipping points, the follow-up on the conversation with the Healthy Planet Action Coalition this week with Oliver Morton, the briefings editor from The Economist, which was an excellent discussion. The setting out the benefits of albedo enhancement and solar radiation management, And also the fourth point, the White House initiative on solar radiation management. So I might just, before we continue on the first point around the security threat from global warming, I might just check if anybody has anything else that they wish to flag at this point. Rebecca.
Yes, if we get time synthesizing the above 4 agenda items, I'm pretty sure that John would like to know people's view or opinion on the actual draft letter that he's done for the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. I've given 2 rounds of extensive comments on it, and I'm sure that anyone on this list has seen it. And, you know, I've been having a separate one-on-one with Herb and so forth. We don't need to discuss it here, but I suggest that it be item 5, and if there isn't time, we can continue that via the email thread. But I know that John has drafted a letter and I've given comments and so on and so forth. So could we have that as item number 5 on the agenda if there's time?
Thanks. I'll add, guys. And sorry, John, just before you reply, is there anybody else with any other comments on the agenda?
Simply my question, which I also put on the post, which is there anyone from the Southern Atmosphere in the discussion?
Myself, Robbie, I don't know who else is actually here, but we've got about 6 active Australians, including one lovely young man that was visiting Stephen during the HPAC meeting, a lovely young architect who is from Canberra, and I'm going to be having a coffee with him when he gets back to Sydney. So, and plus, I'm a member of the Uniting Church, and so is Robbie. We have a lot of Pacific Island members in the Uniting Church. And I also, which you, Daylan, I know you may not be able to read all the hundreds of emails that come, but I've been doing focus groups with one Malaysian Indigenous person who is a Move Beyond Coal activist, plus 3 other Aboriginal Australians. And I'm working with Aboriginal Australians in the policy of the Australian government on it's called Close the Gap. So in other words, I've got a lot of personal friends and professional connections, and I've been doing focus groups on MCB and SAI with those four particular people, and I've outlined all of that in discussions in the email trail. So like after the meeting, you know, we can, I don't want to talk about it here much because I've said it last week in the HPAC meeting, but the answer to the question is there anybody from the Southern Hemisphere? There's about 15 active people, and I've been doing focus groups with a few Indigenous people.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, thank you.
I think, Rebecca, usually when Europeans refer to the South, they mean poor countries. And so it's anomalous that Australia is a rich country in the South and a Western country in the East. So
exactly, all these labels, that the Aboriginal people of Australia have got the highest death rates and incarceration rates, and they are deeply, deeply connected to their country, which, Dale-Ann, now that I've got your email address, I'll forward you a lovely email, which I've sent to a few other people, about a smoking ceremony last Sunday, just 2 days ago. And if anyone else here would like that, just pop your email address in the chat, because I've sent it to Doug, Leslie, I haven't sent it to John, but anyone who, I've sent it to Herb and Robert Tulip. So basically the knowledge is strong, whatever the label is. Indigenous knowledge in here in this part of the world, including Pacific and Tonga and so on, is very strong, and they haven't died, and their culture and knowledge is strong. And I'm chatting with them, speaking with them about SAI and MCB and SRM, all of those 3 different things. So, but I appreciate you pointing out the anomaly of the labels, Robbie. So if anyone would like to receive the email and photos about the smoking ceremony, pop your email address in the chat and I will forward it to you.
Okay. So we've got 5 things on the agenda, and the first one is the security threat from global warming. And John has introduced that already. John, did you want to expand on what you've said already?
Yes, I was very taken by comments at the end of the Cambridge workshop, the CCR workshop on planetary albedo and refreezing the Arctic that you helped organize, Robert. He said that we are a group of people who are who think that refreezing the Arctic is very important and cooling the planet as well. But we're against huge forces who people who distrust, dislike, or castigate the idea of cooling technology, and we need to act together in order to get heard. This is why I very much welcome initiative by Hans and Wouter to look at the having a conference in The Hague and or in Cambridge later this year. I think they were hoping for. One of the things they suggested was to prepare a state of the planet, a kind of position paper, and that's, I think, something that we could work on, because we have I was going to say, a unique perspective on how the Earth system operates and what is happening, and it rather goes against some of the ideas that are floating around in academia and the IPCC and so on. So I think that's quite an important thing we could do, so that the security experts, which I think we ought to invite to the conference, can see what we're proposing in perspective of what's actually happening to the Earth system at the moment. And we have a very strong science basis on using values of heating and so on, which are based on observations and the latest modeling by Hansen to suggest that we at the moment we're heading for a number of degrees of warming, 4 degrees perhaps by the end of the century, or even within 50 years. And he's also saying we're heading for 60+ meters of sea level rise, because unless we do something pretty quickly, we're going to lose the Greenland ice sheet and the other glaciers in the northern hemisphere, and that will trigger the discharge of icebergs from the Antarctica, and we lose the West Antarctic ice sheet and possibly more. That's how we can get to 60+ meters, because everything is triggered.
John, I'm glad that you've mentioned the Hansen paper, because one of the concerns that I have is the complete lack of peer review literature that identifies the potential of geoengineering to respond to the security threat of tipping points. And I think that's Hansen's paper is starting to identify that, but it just seems to me an extreme anomaly that scholars like Professor Tim Lenton at Exeter University have written such excellent material on the dangers of tipping points, but then suggest that we can address it by cutting emissions. And it just seems utterly absurd to me. It's just a really simple issue. And I really, it was really highlighted to me in the Climate Crisis Advisory Group meeting that was circulated this week. And I sent my comments by email on this, but not to Dr. Narali Abram, who's here at the in Canberra at the ANU. She provided an excellent outline of how Antarctica has just gone haywire this year. You know, that the winter sea ice is 17% below its average, which is just far lower than it's ever been since records began. And so we see
absolutely shocking, isn't it, Robert?
It is.
I was absolutely shocked.
We seem to be seeing the as Dr. Abram, I think, commented, the El Nino effect that's been identified for this year seems to be kicking in to just that the masking of the warming that we've seen by the La Nina effect over the last year is likely to reverse into an amplifying of warming over the next couple of years. So but then Dr. Abram commented that there's nothing that can be done with geoengineering to protect Antarctic ice. So we just need to cut emissions. And I thought that was a really unscientific comment from her, from a leading scientist. And but it's very challenging to find ways to engage these people when their whole attitude towards geoengineering is one of mockery. And that's certainly been my experience from the leading climate scientists at ANU. There's a complete failure to engage in a serious way, and the absence. So this is I think also an issue. I had a conversation with Daniel Keeve, who might like to follow up on this, just about marine cloud brightening and how can we justify investment in marine cloud brightening when there are no peer review scientific papers that say that tipping points is a primary security threat. So getting that sort of clarity of message into the academic literature would really be a big help. Daniel, did you want to follow up?
I could follow up on the tipping points issue. Just maybe there is a way around that, in that there's probably quite a few papers showing maybe social tipping points or agricultural tipping points, not the tipping points we think of in terms of the large-scale climate tipping points, but actually ones that are vital to stability of societies. I mean, you think how just in one region, you think in Syria, just the extreme heat impacting on agriculture in particular areas led to people coming to the cities. That caused destabilization. That led to basically the civil war there. And on a grander scale, you know, the food system, I think maybe we can find papers that point to vulnerabilities in the food system from, you know, just sustained levels of extreme heat, for instance, or other, you know, weather phenomena that are worsening, and there's a lot of evidence for that. So I think even though there might not be the papers out there saying, look, we're likely to, you know, lose the Greenland ice sheet within the next decade, maybe we don't need to have those for the strong arguments that we can't wait for net zero type impacts to save our agriculture, for instance. I'm just thinking maybe another angle.
So I would say that a paper that brings together those 3 points of security, geoengineering, and tipping points would be very helpful. Just before I pass on to Herb, I also wanted to mention that I met last week with John Blackburn, who's the convener of the Australian Security Leaders Climate Group, and they've been quite active in Australia, although I haven't previously met with them. Hans van der Loo kindly introduced us, and John invited me to join the group, And it was, again, quite interesting to me to review their literature and see the extent to which they and also, for example, the Breakthrough Group, Ian Dunlop and David Spratt are the leaders of that here in Australia. They set out a very compelling analysis of the problem, but then continue to say that the solution is cutting emissions, and it's just not fit for purpose. So it's a basic strategic problem that's what I hope to engage with the security leaders group. Herb.
Yeah, some of you may remember, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, I posted 2 papers that coincidentally came out within a day or two of each other. One, both were peer-reviewed papers in appropriately prestigious journals, and one made the case that we're likely, well, I don't know about likely, but it's conceivable that there will be a blue ocean event as early as the 2030s, at least in September, in the Arctic, which is contrary to IPCC, which I thought was very significant given the consequences of a BOE, from what I understand anyway. And then the second paper that came out the next day or so was by Pete Irvine, that many of you know, and a couple other colleagues, basically doing an analysis of the ability of the four of the techniques that we have discussed extensively, of SAI, of cirrus cloud thinning, of marine cloud brightening, and of microbeads, and what their impact might be on the Arctic. And while it was only for SAI that they felt, or they concluded that there was enough evidence to be able to assert that there would be a positive impact. But so my thought at that time, and I think you heard me say this, Robert, at a steering circle meeting of HPAC, was that we ought to consider having a session, one of our meetings, where we have a kind of 1-2 punch, where we have a scientific peer-reviewed paper that shows that a much higher risk of blue ocean event in the Arctic, and a paper that showed that we have techniques that look very promising for addressing that blue ocean event. We haven't had any response so far from the steering circle, but I throw that out for any feedback that any of you would like to present today or to me privately.
Thank you, Herb. Robert, Chris, sorry, Daylan, you can please reply.
Yes, I think there has been a paper by the Wuppertal Institute about the tipping points, but I have to look for it. I think I've seen it in the last month or so. So that's a possibility. I also wanted to mention that we have been working with General Middelkoop, who is a Dutch retired general, who is talking to the security community about this very thing. I know that DARPA has invested a huge amount of money. DARPA is a security arm of defense in the United States, in building around all critical infrastructure, especially their bases abroad, what living reefs that are going to be able to protect coastal critical infrastructure, because they're extremely well aware of the threat. So I think that it's an excellent point that if you have a number of these generals together and we get them to also voice their concern in public, it might help the publicity start to roll.
Thank you, Daylan. Now, Robert Chris has taken his hand down, so I'll take.
I got deleted. I got cancelled. But I'm going to pop it up. Actually, I just wanted to make a very simple comment. As you were talking, I did a quick search on Google Scholar and on climate change and security, and there are a number of papers that come up, but interestingly, almost all of them are now quite dated. They go back 10, 15 years. There was only 1 or 2 that I saw scrolling through quickly that were more recent than 2015. So this is clearly a subject that was at one time apparently more alive than it is today. So I haven't looked at any of these papers yet, but I just thought I'd mention that.
Thank you, Robert. Leslie?
Yeah, I just wanted to throw in my frustration, and I'll keep it brief. that, you know, SAI gets so much more attention and somehow considered as more real than an approach like ours, where we have actual field test results. They are not on open ocean or on sea ice, because we've never gotten permission for that, but we've done extensive work on pond ice, and you know, it's in peer-reviewed literature. And so it seems to me that, you know, in proof of actually that you could do this and help save ice, there's a demonstration out there, and we continue to work on it. We have been invited to work on glacial ice, so we'll be contributing that as well as soon as we have our results. But it's I don't understand why we can't be reckoned as a possibility. And the risk factors are so different than stratospheric aerosols that it really seems to me imperative that we get all those other options, like marine cloud brightening, like our surface albedo modification, you know, and others out there for consideration before people think, well, SAI is the only option. So just for what that's worth.
There's an aspect of the security issue that it's not talked about much. It's hard to talk about because it doesn't fall into the usual Overton window. But I believe security is supremely important, but it's not the direct security implications of the warming. I'd say it's more indirect in terms of the effect on the behavior of people and nations. People behave very differently when they are optimistic about the future versus when they're pessimistic. And my feeling is that if we can't bring the global warming situation under control pretty quickly and create a sense of assurance about the future, things could fall apart pretty quickly. We could start having resource wars and conflict between nations. We're already seeing a rise in conflict and even the disintegration of the global economy that was taken for granted not very long ago. The unthinkable can happen a lot more easily than most people realize. I've seen 4 transitions that I would have thought that were unthinkable to me before they happened, and it's sobering. And so the biggest existential danger that we face, in my opinion, is not a direct result of warming. It's the indirect result of warfare. And I can easily see warfare breaking out and ending pretty much everything as a result of the shift in mentality from an international community that cooperates to one in which everybody is competing for their piece of the pie or whatever. And so that gives me a sense of urgency about doing things. And that's why I'm an all of the above kind of person. I believe time is more critical than most people realize, and it's not just because of the upcoming tipping points, some of which are probably already happening. It's because of the tipping point in foreign relations and relations between governments.
Thank you, Roger. Robert, did you still want to follow up?
I just wanted to follow. Yes, I think I want to pick up on Leslie's comment really, and a couple of others about, I don't understand why, when we've got this research and we've got empirical evidence, why it's not being picked up. And I think we need to bear in mind constantly that the whole idea of planetary cooling is a kind of, it's a no-no. It's at a political level, there is almost a kind of case of denial about the fact that it might be needed, let alone necessary. And
at an academic level.
Well, academically and politically, engineers, I think it's very, very widespread. And one of the consequences of this is that people who are in a position of authority or power are very reluctant to embrace the notion that it might even be, that we should invest time and energy and resources in it for fear of the reaction that they will encounter by merely supporting it in some modest way. And so what I take from that, and this kind of came out in the conversation with Oliver Morton, but it's a view I've held for a long time, is that we really have got to address this sort of mindset problem, well, you know, the zeitgeist, the awareness level at these decision-making levels within society, to get them to be at least receptive to the idea that this is something that needs to be looked at. Because at the moment, it doesn't matter how good our ideas are, it doesn't matter what research we've done or anybody else has done, so long as these people who are in positions of power, and remember, again, a point that Oliver Morton made, and I feel really, really strongly in agreement with him, is that no planetary calling is going to be done at scale other than through state actors. So, you know, we have got to find a way of getting the state actors to be receptive to this idea. And at the moment, they are simply not listening. And there's a whole stack of issues we could go into about that. But that is the primary problem. It's not a want of technologies. It's not a want of knowledge. It's not a want of engineering skill. It's simply that even with all of the stuff that we know and that we have, and it's always more we can know, obviously, but we don't have a receptive audience where it really matters. And that is a critical point that I think we forget at our peril. So that's the first thing. And the second thing I want to pick up on Roger's comment. I think that this idea of a security threat is very real, but I think that we don't need to exaggerate it or overemphasize it, because the nature of the societal strains or stresses or collapses, whatever word you want to use, catastrophe, there's a whole stack of words that can be used here. The nature of these, when they start falling, when the dominoes start going over, is that it is all of the above. So it'll be war, it'll be pestilence, it'll be starvation, it'll be migration, it'll be, you just name it. All of the things that cause societal breakdown are all going to come hard on each other's heels. So yes, each is important, but we shouldn't focus too heavily on any one of them to the exclusion of all the others. And I think that's a critical point. The whole thing about cascading tipping points is that they cascade, and it's not just the climatic things that cascade, it's all of the social and all of the environmental and the ecosystem impacts that also cascade right across the board.
Thank you, Robert. I'd like to follow up firstly on Leslie's question about, why do we not have a dispassionate analysis of the range of methods? I'm glad to welcome Brian to the call, who's just joined us. We've been talking about the need for an international albedo union as a body that would be able to consider these issues, and potentially leading to an international albedo authority that would be capable of testing and prioritizing potential cooling suggestions. And as Robert Chris commented, something that really needs to be led by governments. Now, I see Ye Tao's concept of cooling return on investment as a key measure, and so the whole issue of the dose response, the cost benefit analysis of all the different methods that can be applied. Now, on the issue of the risk of war. I think Roger is exactly correct, and there's been this whole area of nudge analysis, that is that a small force can have a big effect, and when you add 15 cubic kilometers of carbon to the air every year, that's quite a big force, and so. That's it's like a tectonic process. That's the nudging towards the earthquake is constant but invisible, and but then when the earthquake comes, it's quite sudden and massive. And I think that, you know, one of the underlying problems that we face, as Oliver Morton also commented, is that Russia wants a blue ocean event in the Arctic, or, you know, some of the matter elements in that in their leaderships appear to want it for both shipping and energy, and so gaining an appreciation of the security benefits of a frozen Arctic, I think is really quite an important point, because I've seen a lot of commentary that suggests that geoengineering would lead to war, whereas my view is that geoengineering would be the greatest possible force for peace and cooperation that we could have in the world. That is, if we were able to convince the nations around the North Pole that a refrozen Arctic would be essential for the broader stability in view of its prevention of the cascade of tipping points, then that the cooperation that would be required to implement that, given that both the intelligence community and the oil and gas community are very powerful influences on the military, and on just the assumption that climate change doesn't matter. That change of thinking to put climate stability at the foundation of military and national security, I think would be really a very a paradigm shift in thinking, which I actually believe is quite possible. Yeah. So I'll leave it at that and hand on to Herb.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the discussion what I think many of you, if you've been looking at the lists the last couple of days, have seen, which is the very significant release by the White House of the 5-year research agenda for what they're calling, and last I checked, there were at least a dozen different terms out there for cooling, but I think they're calling it solar geoengineering. And while very disappointing to many of us, they sort of made an off the record, unattributed comment that they have no intention of actually doing any of this, or at least they didn't say it quite that bluntly, but it was close to that. But nonetheless, it's now out there. And even though they released it in classic US style, when you want to make sure nobody sees it on a Friday afternoon before a holiday weekend, it has gotten picked up by a few magazines and newspapers, including, ironically, the Daily Mail in the UK. But the point is that there is now an opportunity, because it is out there, for Congress to decide, and in our budget process, if they follow what's called regular order, which in past years they have not, which is a whole other discussion. But if they follow regular order, there'll be a dozen or so appropriation bills covering every major sector of the US government between now and October that will be discussed and voted on and marked up and sent to the president for signature. And there's already, I believe, some $8 or $9 million that's appropriated for some form of solar geoengineering research, primarily, I believe, through NOAA. But anyway, the point is that there's a real opportunity for those of us in the USA, and even of those of us outside of the USA who want to help, to see if we can mount a campaign to basically say, here's the 5-year agenda, to number one, to analyze it, see if we see any major deficiencies, praise it where it's worthy of praise, and then to see if we can get Congress, including, obviously, the Republicans control the House now, but they'll have to compromise on the budget, however much hell they put the country through before they do that, because we have a Democratic Senate. So anyway, this is a very real, very tangible opportunity where we can get beyond our generalities, and I don't mean to say that at all critically, and try to get something done for anybody who would like to participate in that kind of effort.
Yeah, actually, we do have this as an agenda item with number 4, isn't it, Robert?
Yes, so let's come back to that further.
Or shall we
Could I
move
just
straight to 4 now?
I've got something I'd like to say about what Robert said, building on what Leslie said, and seeing as the agenda
Okay.
items somewhat flowing together, I think it's relevant also to number 5. If I may, Robbie?
Go ahead, Rebecca.
Thank you. So about zeitgeist and power, one of the people, the Malaysian woman that I've discussed MCB with extensively, and she is aware of SAI, and she thinks that is on the nose, and she certainly thinks nuclear is on the nose as well. When I say that, she's totally opposed to it. I have quite detailed discussions with her because we're doing a couple of interfaith events at my church, and I'm in a book group with her and that kind of thing. So she's actually a woman that I like, that she likes me just as a human. She is the leader of the Move Beyond Coal movement here in Australia. And so she's a full-time paid activist as well as an architect. And it won't take much when we have got our ducks lined up and something cogent that I can share with her, for her to say, she already said to me laughing, Stephen, you'll be pleased to know about this. We were out at the Lakemba night markets and I said, look, maybe I can help get some money for you to go to Hawaii. And she said, no, Rebecca, you need £2 million for MCB. So she already likes MCB and it won't take much for the wildfire to spread. So that's the first thing. State actors, we're already doing MCB here in Australia. It is not, the salt particles are a different size and so forth, but Australia has now got finally a left-wing government who is willing to take the lead when they can do it and when prioritising. And if others don't agree with me about that, we can chat about it offline. But what I'm saying is, for example, also the Kingdom of Tonga. My mother is a personal friend of the niece of the King of Tonga. And, she's been there and visited him. So my mother is 87, but she's still compos mentis and so on and so forth. So anyway, the last one is about technologies. We need to work out what is complementary. For example, Leslie, I think that bright ice is complementary with MCB. However, for scientific reasons, I do not think, and this has nothing to do with politics, it's to do with science, that SAI and MCB can or should be tested together. I think it's quite fine. I've seen a lot of simulation studies about SAI, and I'm really glad that Doug McMartin and other people are doing a lot of work on where should it be done, what would the effects be, and so forth. But if we're getting ready to put up salt or clay or any particle into the upper marine boundary, I think it's called, Stephen, but the troposphere, then we cannot, in terms of science, put up sulfur. Like if volcanoes happen, we can't help it. But thank you, Leslie. And this is one of the main things I've been trying to discuss with you offline in the other discussion. But Oliver Morton made that point last week at HPAC. So myself being a university level science person with, etc., which I've got an amount of science in terms of cause and effect, we shouldn't even think of doing SAI at the same time as we do MCB. And that makes it easier to reach out to people like my friend Fahima and say, for a number of reasons, including MCBs like the ocean and the salt, and because scientifically it's the best thing to do, this is our strategy. And if I now wrap up my on the podium speech, what I would like to do is give, when we are ready, Fahima the actual letter to the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists and see whether she'd like to sign it. And she's going to be a bit nervous at the beginning and she won't be the first signatory, but I know that she will carefully think about it and she might even suggest edits and so forth, but after people have signed it, that won't be possible. But I'm basically saying, can we think carefully about what we are doing and saying? And I think like shocking what Roger has said and absolutely realistic. But anyway, my main point are, let's be very careful about techniques which are complementary or shouldn't be tested together. and the zeitgeist is about to happen, and the state actors are also ready to sign up for it, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
Okay, I think you're moving on to agenda item 5, and you have moved off the security issue.
I did do that, John,
But-
on purpose, because if you're clear about what you're doing, you can reference the different agenda items. Otherwise, we're already now on 5 to 7, but I'm not going to say anything else this meeting.
I'd like to just comment that one issue is that, as Rebecca pointed out, and as Greta Thunberg argues in the paper on geoengineering in her climate book published last year, says that the problem with geoengineering is that it's involves a continuation of the same domineering thinking that caused the problem. And I think that that's completely untrue. I think it's entirely possible. And I think that this goes to our benefits agenda point, that geoengineering action can be grounded in spiritual concern. And that's, I think, something that emerges from James Lovelock's work. Now, I'd like to wrap up the security agenda point and move on to the second point on a review of Oliver Morton's discussion with HPAC this week, and I'd just like to invite John Nissen to kick that off.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm afraid I missed the first 40 minutes, and I haven't managed to put in the timer because I've been up in London with my daughter for the last few days. I haven't managed to listen to the whole of his talk, but I did read your notes, Robert, and I was rather struck by something he said about the main advocates for geoengineering are unwilling to admit that they're advocates in public, and that's a real problem, isn't it? Because
well, the people who are studying it are not advocating for it.
Well, he didn't put it that way. He said the people who think it's necessary, the scientists who think it's necessary, are unwilling to speak out. We did have that with Paul Crutzen, who proposed stratospheric aerosol in the first place, and he had a tremendous problem getting his paper published because of peer pressure against it. And I'm afraid that peer pressure is very strong for everybody in the working in the IPCC. Any papers published in journals, the journals can find peer reviewers who will rubbish anything that suggests that we actually should be deploying SRM sooner or later. So, and I've even had the experience within our group of I've put my asked somebody to sign my paper to the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, and the response was kind of interesting. But then I said, well, would you sign it? And there was silence. So well, I'm sure this individual actually thinks that it's necessary, but he doesn't want to see his name put in print. This is why I think we have to act as a group, and people can then kind of hide behind the group. Well, I'm just a member of the group, and I'm not going to object to the group doing this. We
Yeah.
can't so easily be attacked as a group as we can as individuals. And we know there are some very, very forceful people who really think that we're the devils for advocating SRM, well, especially stratospheric aerosol. That's just beyond the pale. And you know, they don't look at the science. The science is telling us that the main physical problem with stratospheric aerosol injection is having too long a lifetime, so you can't stop it. You couldn't stop it very quickly, and it could have an effect on the ozone hole. So I've looked at those two issues. If you inject north of about 50 degrees or perhaps even 40 degrees north, the lifetime is greatly reduced just to a few months. So you can stop it, and you can stop it before the time of the main reaction of ozone depletion, which is at the end of winter. I have tried to, challenge that with the people who say that that the ozone is not a terrible problem, and they've come up with robust arguments that it isn't a great. The ozone depletion isn't a show that at least it is a manageable amount, and it's certainly not a showstopper. So there's no strong evidence that SAI is dangerous at all. Now, you can say the same thing for marine cloud brightening, but one of the other points that Oliver Morton said was that he was kind of disappointed that was still no demonstration that it would work. And there are huge numbers of dependencies for marine cloud brightening. Can you identify the suitable clouds quickly and inject them and keep them injected as much as possible? Well, perhaps the most you could do is to have them brightened 50% of the time, because you have to let the effect of the nuclei decay. And do we know there are enough of these suitable clouds where we want to have the brightening? And for refreezing the Arctic, you just have to do it everywhere. So
now Oliver didn't raise those.
Oliver Morton, I thought, brought up lots of problems with marine cloud brightening, and he wasn't all anti stratospheric aerosol injection.
Yeah, that's true. Like the question of whether marine cloud brightening can in fact deliver cooling in the places where it's needed is an issue that has been raised. I mean, my view on all of these questions is that we're not competent to really speculate about it, and that's what's needed is government money behind an international governance arrangement that's able to compare all of these things, because it's really just speculation as far as our personal opinions. We'll hear from Robert.
Well,
Chris.
my thought is,
Yeah,
my thought has been all along is that we should be doing everything. I mean, this is such a big security threat, losing the Arctic ice, snow and ice. It's such a big issue that we should be throwing everything at it, beads and so on. And some of them we can test in parallel. In fact, most of them we can test in parallel. We can we can test a stratospheric aerosol using contrails, brightening our contrails and making them last longer. In effect.
Now, let's hear from Robert, Chris, then Dale Ann.
No, I just wanted to say that we need to be really careful when we talk about any of these cooling technologies in terms of places where we need to do the cooling. Because one of the fundamental realities of the climate system is that it's in constant motion. And you know, you don't do anything in the atmosphere that you can contain within a very local area, local region. And particularly if you're doing anything at any kind of globally impactful scale, because we want to keep, you know, we want to get rid of a 1 degree or 1.5 degrees of temperature. The great likelihood is that whatever you do, it's going to cause coolness, or it's going to be cooling in all sorts of places, not just where you'd like it. And one of the problems with all of these technologies is coming to terms with that, because it's probably actually not even controllable, because where the cooling goes, where the impact is felt will vary from situation to situation according to the prevailing winds and the weather as it happens. So one day it could be one place and another day it could be the next place. So these are seriously unpredictable. And one of the reasons that empirical research is needed in all of these technologies is to get some sense of the nature of these risks, because they're never going to be able to get rid of them. You know, this whole one of the arguments that's often been leveled against SEI is, oh, it's going to move the monsoon. Well, you know, maybe it will, maybe it won't. Maybe it depends upon when it's done. Maybe it depends on where it's done. But wherever you do it, if you're going to take out a degree or two of temperature, you can bet it's going to have an impact all over the place, and not necessarily just in the places you'd like it to have an impact. So,
well, this is one of the points that Oliver Morton made in favour of stratospheric aerosol injection. The aerosol spreads itself around the planet very quickly, so it has no immediate effect on anything, and particularly, and it has no effect. It has no effect on monsoons. It's not going to have any effect on monsoons in the short term. What it's doing is a blanket. Hang on, Robert. Hang on, Robert. Please let me finish speaking.
You interrupted me. I thought I felt free to interrupt you. So, you know,
I'm just putting Oliver Morton's point in contradiction to what you've just said, and you haven't let me finish that point.
Could I say, everyone, what we need after this, in my opinion, is for someone to sit down with the transcript that is going to be produced, because Brian very kindly turned Fireflies on, and actually sift and sort it into a rational paper. And I am not going to do that, because I've already edited John's letter to the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. But everything that everyone is saying is accurate. And Oliver Morton said very, very, very clearly, exclamation mark, only field tests on one thing at a time, MCB or SAI. So to me, that is the fundamental scientific point, which Leslie agrees with, because she put her hand up before. But instead of each other interrupting each other, how about if we have as an action item, somebody sits down with the SAI transcript, sorry, the AI transcript, and edits it into something logical that we can all look at.
Now, Dale,
I'm prepared to.
John, okay,
I will put a written answer to what Robert Chris has said, and I will also write a criticism of Oliver Morton, because I think you can do the testing of various things at the same time.
Okay, thanks, John. No, I want to
do it in writing, because otherwise we waste time on the argument.
Exactly,
okay.
exactly.
No need to repeat. So I just wanted to check if Robert Chris was finished.
I just make that point that, you know, I was actually just responding to your point, the comment that you made, Robbie, that the reference to where we want the cooling. And I simply want to emphasize that where the cooling happens, you can't guarantee that that's the only place it's going to happen, or even that it will happen there, because of the variability of the climate, of the weather. Because when you do it, it's not about the climate, it's about the weather that's actually happening in the moment. That's
Thanks,
all.
Robert. Dale-Anne?
Yes, thank you. I have to again refer to our professor in Delft, the cloud professor. I think he's done the most advanced research on this cloud problem and the speed at which it's going to reach a continent if you are, for instance, spraying in Namibia or off the coast of California or in Peru, which are the present ideas that are circulating at the moment about MCB. So it might be useful to get someone who's actually working on it to comment on that. And my second thing was, there has been since the 27th of February of this year, a letter from concerned scientists advocating research on atmospheric aerosols and their potential to increase the reflection of sunlight from the atmosphere to address climate risk. And that has already been signed, or was already signed in February, by 110 scientists. And I don't know how many more have signed since then.
Yes, we heard about that from, and Hansen was one of those. I think we've referred to that in our letter to the Bulletin of Scientists.
So these are clearly people who are coming.
There is this support, academic support
Yes.
for research on SRM.
Thanks, Dale-Anne. Brian?
Yes, I would like to comment that there are regional approaches that, in most likelihood, would not require limiting to one thing on the entire planet, and that could include marine cloud brightening over the Great Barrier Reef, for example, which might occur, at a similar time to when one might make a regional intervention in the Arctic. And the point is, those are sufficiently decoupled with regional effects that it's possible to conduct more than one trial on a planet at a particular time for regional solutions. And I would like to highlight the work of Professor Tapio Schneider at Caltech, who's spent most of the last decade looking at how a warmer world, a warmer planet, sadly, is likely to have fewer clouds globally than pre-industrial. So we've seen evidence for that in the dimming of planet Earth over the last 20 years, as evidenced by the Big Bear Solar Observatory. This is Brian, I'm complete.
Thank you, Brian. Now, I'd like to move on from the discussion of Oliver Morton's paper. I just would like to comment, John Nissen, I think I know we're all very passionate about these issues, but in terms of a meeting process, if you're able to raise your hand and wait till other people finish, my preference is that we generally speak by using the raise hand function, so that we can have more of and perhaps write down what you're planning to say so you don't forget it, and then wait your turn to speak. I just think that creates a little bit less aggro in the meeting. So now the next thing.
It's just that I am the chair, so I do have a prerogative to try and keep the proceedings on track.
Do you know what, John? You are the chair, but when you interrupt Robert Chris, for example, who's made notes and is actually trying to give a bit of a reasoned argument in response to what he's just heard before, like in a parliamentary debate, which of course we have in Australia and you have in the UK, it interrupts the flow of Robert's thought, and it means that he gets startled and we can't remember what he was talking about before you made your point. So I am begging you, please stop. I haven't finished yet. I'm acting like my mother and my Aunt Theodora now. I am asking you, please, whether you are the chair or not. I don't know whether you're the chair. It actually appears to me that Robert Tulip is chairing the meeting. You're the chair of Prague. So please, can you observe meeting protests and etiquette like the chair of this meeting, Mr. Robert Tulip, has asked you to do, please?
Can I just correct you? Robert interrupted me.
Okay, so look, let's just move on. Robert, Chris, you have your hand up. You muted yourself.
That's because I haven't put it down. I'm going to go. Sorry, I'm putting it down now.
Okay, so I'd like to move on to the benefits of solar radiation management as the next agenda point that that John had suggested. And if I could just introduce the topic, the themes that I find really interesting are sea level rise, biodiversity loss, extreme weather, peace and cooperation, and tipping points. And it seems to me, like my sense is that they are quite overwhelming benefits of directly cooling the planet with higher albedo, and that they give great grounds for optimism and hope for the future. And I find that the another theme around brightening is the very dark mood that has afflicted very many young people, especially of pessimism for the future, and the sense that humanity has the capacity to apply technological ingenuity to solve the global warming problem, or at least create a positive path towards solutions, is something that can really inspire a lot of hope for the future. So these sorts of benefits, I think, again, are a really important point. And as we've previously discussed, the very negative commentary that came from some scientific leaders in the geoengineering community, there's been a tendency to vastly overemphasize the risks and completely understate the benefits. So, Daniel.
Yeah, I just want to follow on from that on the, talk about the dark mood of a lot of younger people. And I think, from my point of view, and as someone with a young child, I think that really there's so much gloomy news in the media about the climate, and actually just discovering this little niche, really is niche at the moment, group of scientists who are looking at things outside the box, in a way, outside the box of carbon reduction, has given me a lot of hope. I think partly because I registered a domain name, I'm into marketing and that sort of thing. The domain name I registered was actually brightidea.earth. And I thought when I've finished with Stephen's site, that sort of thing, I'd make that something that could be maybe a useful central platform, talking about different albedo technologies, and obviously taking a lot of the sort of arguments from the other sites we're developing. But I thought it might be quite a nice thing. And it's funny, I saw Jonathan Cole suggesting one of the acronyms being International Delegation for Expanding Albedo, which is IDEA. So bright idea. Great minds think alike. But anyway, yeah, I thought I'd mention that the positivity that is possible from the reality of the discussion, just points like the 0.6% increase in albedo, in the Earth's albedo, being enough to counterbalance all the basically all the warming from greenhouse gas pollution, which is a staggering statistic if you think about it. And I know it doesn't make things easy to achieve, but it's just it makes things seem a bit more manageable when you think of things in terms of that, rather than just trillions of tons of carbon being sucked out of the atmosphere. Anyway, that's my
Thank you, Daniel. I'm just wondering if John Nissen wanted to comment on benefits.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Daniel. We have moved on to the item 3 on the agenda very seamlessly. That's great. Yes, I want to produce a list. I don't know if anybody remembers the email, but I can't find it. I had 20 points to match the 20 points that Alan Robock had written against stratospheric aerosol injection. But my points were for SRM, benefits of SRM. And there's tremendous enthusiasm among us, the members of our groups who are ecologists. They really think that cooling is the thing that's going to help save the coral reefs and save the ecosystems, the Arctic ecosystem. And Brian has made numerous points that we should be selling our enthusiasm for SRM on the basis of what it can do for nature, as well as for ourselves more directly. So I'll have another stab at making the list, and we can all work on that. That would be a really good thing to produce for the next meeting, perhaps.
All right. Does anybody else want to comment on the benefits of solar radiation management? If not, the fourth point that we had was the White House initiative on solar radiation management. And we already had some conversation about that, and perhaps Herb might like to just recap on that.
Sure. Just to briefly summarize, the US Congress last year basically inserted language in their appropriations bill that directed the White House to essentially outline what a 5-year solar geoengineering research program would look like. And that's what, in fact, the Office of the White House, this Office of Science and Technology Policy, along with NOAA, which coincidentally, those of National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, is headquartered right around the corner from my house here. Anyway, 3 or 4 federal agencies worked on that. They solicited comments, and many of you may have been involved in that process about 6 or 8 months ago or so. We submitted some comments as to what that research agenda should look like. And they released their report very quietly a couple days ago, just before 4 o'clock, with a 45-page document that I sent around, and happy to send it around or put it in the chat again. I only looked at it briefly. It looked like a reasonable, solid job. It focused on looking at SRM from a risk point of view, the risk of SRM or the risks versus the risks of climate change without SRM in the future, which I think is an appropriate way to one of the appropriate ways to look at it. But then the sort of the hooker or the the sort of poison pill was an unattributed quote in the article, in the one article that I initially saw, which someone in the White House said off the record that they have no intention of actually moving ahead with this research. And that was sort of left there. So that's sort of where we are. And as I mentioned briefly, I won't repeat it, what I said earlier in the meeting, though, there is an opportunity. And now it's like you might say that, sort of game is on. For the first time, we have an official 5-year proposed research by a high-level group of very smart people in the United States White House. And it's something that I would encourage HPAC and PROG and anybody else to take a close look at, and to decide whether there should be an effort. I certainly think there should be, to modify it or critique it, support it, and get it funded, and make it happen. So that's sort of where we are with that right now.
Thanks, Herb. Yes, it's certainly an exciting advance in the public conversation. And as I commented in an email about it, the absence of broader public acknowledgement and discussion as a priority just seems to constrain the politics. And as you pointed, and I think also Ron Bayman also commented, that the voter base of the Democrat Party is generally quite hostile to geoengineering. And
I was going to say, if I could, I mean, not to get into a technical discussion here, but there are some major U.S. green groups that do support geoengineering research. I mean, Bruce Melton, who some of you read about, he was able to get the Sierra Club to basically reluctantly support geoengineering in the case of a break the glass emergency. The national NRDC, National Research Defense Fund, from their website, when I checked last time, supports it. The Environmental Defense Fund supports it. So some of the big sort of establishment groups do not, the activist smaller groups, remain, as far as I know, hostile to it and would jump all over probably any movement. But I think I would hope in the behind the scenes, and those of you who may know Kelly Wanzer from Silver Lining, who we tried to get speak with us, but were unsuccessful. They are, from everything I've heard, very influential behind the scenes in helping to set the research agenda, and they have close ties with Congress and the White House and so forth. So if anyone has any ties with Kelly, I think that would be helpful. But in other words, it's not one-sided that this will go nowhere. I mean, I think there's enough potential support, and hopefully it will happen with or without us. But to the degree to which those of us in the U.S. and others too, certainly a lot of background research and analysis that can be done without having to be physically sitting in the United States. So anyway, just sort of set that we haven't had a chance, since it just was a couple days ago, we haven't had a chance to discuss that at the HPAC steering circle yet, or obviously at any of our meetings. But I think that the time is probably fairly short because the budget process, it's either underway now or will be underway very soon in the U.S. Congress. And also, I'm not convinced that that the Republicans would necessarily be against geoengineering, at least quietly in the background. They were very supportive of major tax breaks for CCS. Now you might just say, well, that's because of the oil industry, perhaps, but ironically, they may be more supportive, or at least less opposed to it, than some on the left in the Democratic Party. You may have some strange bedfellows, and at least this effort, having this surface, will hopefully surface the supporters in the opposition publicly. So at least we'll see where the sort of forces on all sides stand, which I think will be really helpful in terms of figuring out what the opportunities are to make some progress.
Okay, so we're coming to the end of our time. I'd just like to invite Rebecca to comment on the letter to the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists.
Yes, thanks, Robbie. So firstly, I applaud John for the initiative, and action items. I'd like you to know, John, I've sent it to Leslie. We've been having one-on-one discussions about the US matter that Herb just raised then. So it's a different subgroup of HPAC, including Robbie, Ron, Herb, myself, and Leslie. I don't think that's all that's on that particular thread. What I've asked Leslie to do there is to provide information on bright ice, and as a footnote, because I've added that in as a reference down at number 6. I've also asked Leslie to read it, pretending that she's a new reader, like an environmentalist, an Indigenous person, or a scientist, and to take note of her comments and her reactions, because she had some reactions, intellectual and emotional, about the things. And, the email is not a secret. If you want to see it, I'll forward it to you. But in any case, the scientific method that I've asked Leslie to follow is to read the letter, take notes as a new reader or someone who hasn't looked at it for a while, then add her own comments on bright ice and so on. And it's already 5 pages, so probably that just can stay as a reference. But the third thing I've then asked Leslie to do is to review the whole letter with every comma, every word, and so forth, even though there are differences between countries. And, Robbie Tulip's father was a professor of English, so he puts commas in different places than others of us, perhaps. But anyway, Leslie's got my clean copy of the one that I did work on, and we'll be looking at it after this. She's already told me. what I want to
Thanks,
say.
Rebecca. I want to close off and just invite John Nissen to have the last word.
Yeah, okay. Quite an interesting meeting. A bit. I regret being rather assertive, perhaps beyond my natural inclination. Actually, I'm fairly modest kind of character, really. But it's just that. So anyhow, to round up, I think we've had a fairly good meeting. We've agreed that on the first item on the agenda that it is a security issue. So we need to bring in the security community to draw attention to the urgency for implementation. I think we're pretty agreed to disagree what's the best best implementation method. So we defer that to others to decide. We have our own opinions and we can put them on as we like, and we try and be fairly neutral in our statements, as I've tried to be in the letter to the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, and which incidentally I've already got signed by some people, so I don't really want to change it. Now, with regard to Oliver Morton, he raised some issues on which we are certainly not agreed. Not only what he, on the points he was making, but also on what he actually said. So I think we need to spend a little time going through that, and that would be quite instructive. On the benefits,
John, yeah, we've come to the end of our
okay.
time.
On
So
the
just
benefits,
quickly wrap up.
I'm going to do a list of that, and Herb has made a good case for communicating with the White House people on their plan. Thank you, everybody.
Look, thanks everyone so much for joining the meeting today. I thought it was great, and especially thanks Dale Ann and Roger for joining us. And I look forward to following up further. And thanks. We'll end there. Bye bye.
Can you leave it on for a sec, Robbie, just while I save the chat, please? Like less than a minute while I'm trying to do the technology of saving the chat.